I'm Lisa Nance, and I'm an ICN coach up here in the Coeur d'Alene area. And there might be a couple people joining us still. This afternoon is hard, right? After being on Zoom all day. So I just want to give you guys a round of applause for being here. And because Krista has some really awesome things to share with you today. And so this is Krista Bullard, and I've had the pleasure of knowing her for a few years. And what my perspective of Krista is that she has like this calming presence, and she works in an alternative high school. And I see two things. She's always trying to work on building those trusting relationships with her students and at building their capacity by building their engagement in their learning. And so hopefully you will just really enjoy your time with her today. And Krista, whenever you are ready, go ahead and take over.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa. So like Lisa said, I teach at Mountain View Alternative High School. It's my 9th year teaching there. And I teach both English and also history, social studies, and I taught Spanish even for a little bit. And so that's why this one I really wanted to gear it towards non-ELA as well, because I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, like I am the English department at my school, because there's only one of us. So I talk a lot with my other colleagues on how to implement English strategies into their curriculum. And so we'll go ahead and just get going on our slides here. So there's the slides, if you have them available, if you could pull them up, because I'm going to have you on slide 3 of this. These are common kind of ideas that we hear from students or things that they say. And I'll give you a moment here just to kind of pull that up if you don't have that yet.
Yeah, that was my bad, Krista. I accidentally copied a bunch of stuff. So if you want to look in the chat window, if you're not already there,
Thank you.
That bottom link is the link to the slideshow, which will give you some editing ability, because Krista has some interactive stuff for you today.
And there's not too much interacting with the slides, just a couple points today. And so this is one of them, just to kind of start us out to see. And so I have 4 different statements here, or kind of observations. And if you want to take a moment just to read through those, and there's stars on the sides and on the bottom, and just pull up 1 or 2 stars next to statements or kind of observations that you have experienced or resonate with in the class. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those discussion and hard time supporting their ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it seems like, especially those bottom 2 of the Socratic seminars, seen at that basic level and that supporting ideas, and those really go hand in hand. While one is discussion, one is in a writing generally format, or even in a discussion format, but they really go hand in hand. And so I hope after today that we'll get some tools even to address those a little bit more. And so on slide 4, I have a comment kind of box, some instructions there, just so I can see a little bit more about you guys. I just want you to add a comment in the box of what subject do you teach or subjects. And if there's a unit or lesson that comes to mind that kind of even signing up for this session that you really would like to add more reading and writing to, or improve the quality of your reading and writing in that lesson or unit. So I'll give you a minute here to kind of think about that and put it in the chat box. And again, I have mine where I teach English and history. And my goal was to add more writing to, World War II, and kind of propaganda and whatnot. That was what I really wanted to add more for my lesson. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, excellent. And so Lisa and Allison, you guys are both kind of working with language learners. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that we're both from the same school too. Oh. Allison teaches kindergarten, I teach first grade.
Awesome.
But I mean, you know, it's just not the language learners. It's also these children that come from poverty that just haven't really even heard a lot of language. So sometimes I think when we say language learners, it's also, which we do. We have a lot of ELLs. But also we have a lot of poverty, and these kids only have heard just commands. They haven't heard rich language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's funny because I teach high school, but the lesson I went to this morning, by the way, was just how to teach reading. So I can learn how to teach my son reading. And so I learned a lot of good tools from that lesson too. And we were talking about that very same thing this morning. So let's go. I'm going to slide share here with 5. Oh, that's not on the one. Sorry, I was doing the wrong thing. Sorry. More screen share. That's what I need to do. All right. And so I'm going to go over kind of where I got most of the curriculum for today. It's from this book called Visible Learning for Literacy, is where I got a lot of this information from. And I have a link here on this slide that actually goes right to it. And there's also a visible learning for math and a visible learning for science as well. They have 2 separate books. And I believe they all follow kind of the same concept. And so I have right here this graph that kind of shows what they're talking about in levels of literacy. And so it starts down here, obviously at the surface level learning. And you have deep learning and then transfer learning. And I find I have these people going up, obviously, the ladder. A lot of my students, they get stuck. And a lot of them, because they've generally failed a lot of their middle school years. They get to me and they're all different levels. And I've had a hard time, sometimes moving them forward, getting them to those rich conversations. And it's generally because I need to take care of their surface level of where we at. And then we move to that deep level, and then we can go to that transfer, and whatever the skills they have, we can put them across different types of learning. And I have this little graph off to the side here. I found in all elements, it's a matter of reading, doing, writing it, and talking about it. And I've used this method in all of my classes, and it's really helped students, especially my lower level, by making sure that we're reading it, kind of processing it, and then going to that deeper level, we're doing something, and then talking about it. And literacy, I find the actual writing part is, obviously literacy is both reading and writing. And when they're having a hard time reading, obviously then they're going to have a hard time writing. And sometimes I find that lack of comprehension, obviously, that can't transfer to the writing. And it's kind of thinking about what's the writing for? Am I writing as an assessment, like to see their knowledge? Is the writing a way for them to figure out information, to think through things? And so it's kind of thinking, what is the purpose of my writing in essence? And so we just want to make sure that whenever we're asking them to write or to read, and at whatever level, that we're giving them, obviously, the tools that they need. So I'm going to go through on this next slide. We're going to be doing some reading today of some different tools that are from this Visible Learning book. And what I like about this, because it actually has examples from K through 12. and not just, even though I teach high school, it's through all grades, and they give examples kind of what that would look like. So again, I would recommend this book. But for annotation, when we tell students to annotate, we always have to tell the purpose for it. So that I have here, the core idea is that annotation should help the reader during and after reading. The purpose, annotate helps us interact with the text, understand the text, track changes of progression, ideas, identify areas of interest or concern. And so obviously this will look different for different grade levels. But the thing is, though, the annotation has to help them. It's in some way where they're making meaning, where they're interacting with the text, and it's useful for them. Because at least for older students, when I have them, they'll just highlight like the whole page. They'll say, what's the main idea? And they'll highlight the whole page. It's showing me maybe they're not understanding what the main idea is. And so I actually give them a pretty loose guideline. Like some teachers have them circle, underline, and that can be helpful because it's training them. But I have them write one meaningful annotation, at least for my older kids. So they're interacting with the text. So I'm kind of forcing them in interacting. And so on the next slide, the basis of good annotation, again, highlighting a phrase or sentence and including a comment, circling a word that needs defining, posing a question when something isn't fully understood, or writing a short summary of a key section. And so I'm going to go through just for you guys, I'm going to do what I would model annotation. And then we're going to read a couple things on just the surface level learning. Because this next part, it's going to be your turn. You're going to keep in mind for you, how can I support struggling students in literacy within my own classroom? And so this is going to be on the digital notebook. And I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Can you see the digital notebook on your screen? Did it come up on yours? No? Okay. Maybe I stop share and I share it. Thank you for putting that digital notebook in, Lisa. Let me try that again.
Oh, either, but the digital notebook is a forced copy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you go. Yep. Okay.
And so for this, how it's organized is the first 4 are just some of the surface level. But again, this can be for, there are so many more surface level learning, and then deep literacy and transfer learning. And so I'm going to go through just the top one of how I would do it, and so that you guys can do this as well. So I'm going to do a think aloud, just a modeling out loud, kind of how I would for my students. So it says, in retrospect, this was obvious, yet we didn't understand at the time. Nancy recalls working with seasoned teachers to develop new knowledge and skills about problem-based learning, PBL. She held workshops, engaged in professional reading and discussion, hosted a professional learning community focused on the practice. Yet time and again, the effort fizzled and teachers said it didn't work. I've been there. We tried to do PBL and it didn't work. They blamed their students, existing knowledge, lack of motivation, and inability to engage in self-directed learning. PBL, they said, didn't work, full stop. Yet the problem-based learning can work under the right condition. That's interesting. And I'm going to highlight that because, again, we tried to do a problem-based learning curriculum and it didn't work very well. We had a lot of shortcomings at our school. However, this is critical, isn't particularly effective when students don't yet possess the knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed to engage in inquiry-driven investigation about topics. Okay. In other words, your timing is off. All right. This is something, I'm going to highlight this. This is something that I really realize. And what I'm going to do is I can highlight this, but also if I highlight and then I can create a comment. And so it should be off to my right for some reason, sorry. Sorry, I apologize. I had to use my husband's laptop today and not my computer. So I don't know where everything's at. I'm out of my element. So sometimes throughout this whole day, I've been very frustrated trying to find things. This is normally where I'd put a comment right here off to the side. There it is. Right, yeah. So we put investigation, skills needed. And so this is why I think was the main reason why what we did didn't work at our school. We tried to do this really cool genius hour type stuff, and it was a failure because our kids didn't have the skills. And so what skills are needed to start this PBL, whatever it is. And so that would be for us what skills we're missing. And that's what we really saw. PBL is better for deepening knowledge, but not for the initial surface and advance in such study. This is mainly because it is introduced too early before students have sufficient surface knowledge. And so for discussions and things like that, when we have Socratic seminars, those are all sometimes higher level learning. And if they don't have the sufficient skills at first, obviously they can't do that. So I want you guys to go through this. I picked it because it does a really good job at explaining the surface level and why it's important. But the other ones are kind of some examples of surface level learning. And so I'm going to give you about 7 minutes here. Let's stop share to read through those sources. And you're not going to have time to read through all of them, but I want you to highlight a few, and we're going to come back with kind of a discussion on surface level learning. And so if you could, again, on that digital notebook, or if you have yours printed out, you can obviously highlight on paper. I personally prefer paper. And so I'll give you about 7 minutes to read through those, whatever ones you'd like, and then we'll come back for a discussion and kind of a share out. So if you like to at this time, you can turn off your camera and while you're reading. And so we'll be back in about 7 minutes. We have one more minute for our reading. All right, so we're gonna come back here. So again, you don't have time generally to read all of them. So you can read most of you can read some of the other ones on your own time. And again, I have a resource later, which has just tons of different types of surface level learning, deep and transfer that you can kind of look into, again, of all different grade levels. So especially for applying for elementary. So we're on slide 9. You want to go back to that. One of the surface level was summarizing, and I use this actually quite a bit with my students just to check in if they're understanding what was the lesson today. What did whatever concept I was trying to do, having them summarize, and you can have them summarize in tons of different ways. It kind of helps to know where there's holes in their learning before we move up that ladder. And so I'm going to have us summarize. If you could click here on this is a Jamboard. And if you click on this, and Lisa's also going to put a link in the chat window as well. If you don't have the slides up, she's going to put a link in the chat window to get to that on the Jamboard. And you are going to add a sticky note to it to give a 1 to 2 sentence explanation of the surface level learning tools you read about. And so off the left-hand side, if you haven't used Jamboard before, there's a sticky note on the left, and you'll just click on it. It'll give you a different color, and then you kind of write a 1 or 2 sentence summary of, or an explanation of the surface level learning tools you read about. Excellent. The types of questions. That darn internet. Excellent. So those inquiry units. Absolutely. Okay, so we definitely said that those types of questions, those inquiry, I'm really excited then for us to discuss. Again, this is a really good way just to quickly check in with students to see where they're at on a certain level in of a different way. Obviously, it's just a a quick formative assessment tool. Or some of it. Okay, so we're going to go back to our slides here, and we're going to actually go to a breakout room, but we're so small, so we are going to be the breakout room, you guys all together, which is awesome. Sorry, let me pull up the slides. I have to find again where these get put. They always get put in a spot right. I don't know on this on this computer. I'm sorry. I really don't like my husband's laptop. I don't know where anything is. Okay. Don't know where my slides are.
I know you have slide 10.
Yeah, so I have my notes. I have my physical copy slide, so I can tell you what it is, what we're doing. But gosh, I just don't know how to work his stuff here. I'll pull up the slideshow from our own link, so it's all good.
I can screen share too if you want while you find it.
Okay, I found it. Okay, so we're on slide 10. So we're going to go to our breakout room, but as a group today. And whenever you have any discussions with students, you have to have a discussion norms. And they're re-emphasized. And I always do a lot where I teach them, and afterwards we reflect on how did we do? And then how can we improve for the next time? And so sometimes I have it do it just with I have these little magnets on my board, and they'll have like a line, and I have them go put a magnet on the board for how well they think the class did on a certain norm. And then so I can see, kind of everybody else can see, and then we pick one that we really want to work on for our next discussion. Maybe it's listening or active listening or whatever it is. I often do that. And so as a class, we're creating our goals to become better listeners and speakers. So in ours today, our discussion norms are allow everyone to have a chance to talk, build on each other's ideas, work towards shared understanding, and ask for clarification if you are confused, and always have your book or reading in front of you. And so that's something, especially whenever I do some type of Socratic seminar or reading or whatever it is, that we have it in front of us so we can all refer back to it. It's quite helpful. So for you, that might be pulling it up. And then I also have on slide 11, these are called talk moves. So talk moves, I give to my students a little piece of paper I print them out on, and they put a check mark next to them when they have done them in a conversation. And it gives them kind of sentence starters, because while my students are older, having academic discussions is generally not something they're used to. And so they have to train what kind of things do you say? How do you give the floor? How do you yield the floor to people? And how do you build on someone's comments? And so these talk moves are really helpful as just kind of sentence stems for students to use. And so I encourage you to try to use one today too, one of these talk moves as you have your discussion. And the questions that you guys are going to discuss today are back on slide 10, is again, we've already gone through state your name and what you teach. So we already kind of know that, so we don't need to do that. But questions 2 and 3, especially at elementary level where you guys are at, of how you can apply these and how you can support struggling students in literacy. Again, that's reading and writing within my own classroom at the surface level of learning. And what practices do I use at the surface level of my classroom currently? And so we'll have this discussion again in how to apply these at an elementary level for you guys. And so we'll go ahead and we'll just, do you want us to do that discussion then here, Lisa? That works? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself, and I'm gonna have you guys discuss. And that's ultimately the goal as a teacher, that we can move out and let the students be able to have the discussion with themselves. And so sometimes I sit on the edge, I sit kind of with them, and then I move farther and farther away where they're having the discussion without me by the end. So anyway, so I'll mute myself and off you guys can begin. The person with the brightest shirt is the one who gets to start.
That might be me, but I would really like to hear what you all have to say. But I'll just say that one of my favorite things is the word and concept sorts, because especially when I'm either vocabulary or teaching concepts, it feels like the ability to group words together takes a special level of understanding of vocabulary and words. And you could use images as well for concepts. How about, what do you all think at the elementary level? And Ms. Salazar, I'm not sure what level you're at, but.
To go along with what you said, Lisa, can you guys hear me? I have my earbuds in. I've started doing vocabulary slides. So each week I make slides with 1 or 2 words on each page that have a picture to go with them. And then I have 3 pairs in my classroom. So we're all 4 doing the same vocabulary words. And then at the end of the week, we do some kind of cumulative activity to review those words. That's one of the things we've seen lacking in our IRI scores was vocabulary. So that's one of the things that I started doing for us. And I share them out with the teachers and they can use them in their classrooms too.
One thing, yeah, we've done for vocabulary for first grade, I encourage them to draw pictures when we're going through certain words or concepts, any type of concepts. And then also to try to act out. We have, like for math, part, and then we poll, and then we keep doing that. Just trying to act out. Also the vocabulary words will help out as well.
Yeah, kind of going off of what Lisa said, especially like where Lisa and I teach, having a lot of language learners, vocabulary, a lot of that is at very much surface level for them because they're just learning it. So I know us, one that my kids have loved is our pronouns. So it's like a pronoun is like a light bulb. So we do a pronoun replaces a noun. And that's been like the one thing that anytime I ask them, I'm like, okay, what does a pronoun do? And I'll see like half my kids going, okay, pronoun replaces a, and then I hear like 10 kids screaming noun. And I'm like, yes, exactly. But yeah, definitely a lot of movements and pictures as well. With the younger grades is what we've done a lot of.
So I joined in a little bit late and my slides aren't loading really well. That's something I've been trying to do is to echo someone else. I've been doing vocabulary slides, but for middle grade, it's been like a PowerPoint filled with a total of 10 slides. The first slide is where they put their name and stuff. The second slide is an example of a word I do, where they have the definition, part of speech, synonym, antonym, an example sentence, and they choose a picture to help them remember. And I have done that first, and then they practice those vocabulary words on vocabulary.com. And it's been pretty helpful. And I've had fewer kids complaining about vocabulary lessons. And what I found most helpful about it was I had a kid come up to me and say, Miss Salazar, when you just assign us stuff on vocabulary.com, it's not helping. So I gave them the slides and I haven't had another kid say it. So
that's really cool. And I love Lisa and Allison talking about the movement. What's that? I can't think of the term for that. Well, there's like a term, right? For like full. So the other thing, one of you said, I don't remember who said it, but I was thinking about that surface area, the driving enduring understandings and essential questions. And one thing that I feel like I always get a win at the end is if I ask the same question at the beginning, at the middle, at the end, and maybe more times in the middle as they're learning about a concept, because that metacognitive thing, like where learners realize they're learning, but they didn't know that they were learning. So if they are going back to that essential question multiple times, they can see how their thinking has changed. And I think especially with struggling learners, being aware that they're actually learning something, I think boosts that like confidence. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. I didn't get that really before, but now I do. So have any of you done anything with the essential questions? Or I don't know how much time we have, Krista.
We have just a little bit. To use my talk move, I agree with Lisa, what Lisa said, because I have experienced it so many times, is that to always reemphasize the essential question, whatever new task we're doing, it's to remind them that we're still, again, what to focus on. Whatever my essential, especially when it's inquiry based and we're trying to do something, is always like, oh yeah, that's my skill. And then they can also see where they're growing and what they've learned. And then sometimes we'll go back and revisit right from the very beginning where they were at. So I found a lot of success with continually just reemphasizing that question throughout our lesson. And in the beginning, those small wins give them a lot of success. With struggling students, we have to give them success and they feel successful at that surface level, because then it'll let us allow them to go, to that deep and transfer level. So we're going to move forward here because I want to get to those other levels and talk about them. And we're going to kind of just, Lisa, bypass slide 12 and 13 just for the sake of time. And we're just going to go right to slide 14. And so slide 14, again, is that same pyramid of deep and transfer learning. And I find that sometimes in education, it's with those inquiry questions, we start at the surface, but we don't want to stay at the surface. So vocabulary structure is vital. Then we want to keep using those new words and new concepts, right, as we continue up into that deep and transfer learning. And so that's what we're going to focus on today, of how we can move beyond that, because sometimes we move too fast. And I've totally done that. And I realize my students are not getting it. Or sometimes it's frustrating with my students, I find, at least for me as a teacher, is because we have to stay so long at the surface level. We just get a peek at the very top, at that transfer level. And we're just there, but we don't get to spend a lot of time there. But that's the nature of it. And so we're going to read through a couple more things here. So we're going to go back to your digital notebooks, and we're going to give you, again, about 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes to read through whatever you would like for on that transfer or deep level learning. It's up to you. Again, you can turn your camera off and you can read through that, and then we'll come back and then have another discussion. Again, feel free to pick whatever kind of interests you for that deep level and transfer level learning in your digital notebook. Are there any questions?
If anyone's having trouble getting either the slideshow or digital notebook, just unmute and ask, and I can try to help with that.
About 1 more minute left. I know it's not enough time to read all these sources, but about 1 more minute left. All right, so welcome back. I'm gonna go ahead and share with you guys these questions here for our kind of next discussion about kind of in deep level and transfer level learning. So we have question 1, share which articles you read and your big takeaways. Number 2, how can I support struggling students in literacy within my own classroom at the deep and transfer level learning? 3, how is timing important strategies in the classroom to support struggling readers? And 4, and writers, sorry. And number 4, how have you used any of the strategies in the deep and surface level? And what has been your experience? So I'd like to maybe start with the number 1 first, and just so we know, just kind of go around and have each person share the articles they read and their big takeaways, and then we'll kind of then jump into 2, 3, and 4 as more of a discussion. So someone who thinks they drank the most cups of coffee today can start.
Allison or Jen, you look like you're ready to say something.
So I don't drink coffee, but I probably had
that's what
more
I was gonna
energy
say.
drinks
I
than
don't drink
everybody else. One of them that I read that really stuck out to me was the graphic organizers. And we've done that a couple of times in my class. Because then I read it and then I looked at the example of them for the concept maps. Especially the trees one. We've made one for our habitats that we've been working on for the last couple months. That was one that I really liked. And then I started, what one was it? I think it was the discussion one. Discussion and questioning. And especially kindergarten, that one's kind of a hard one. Without them getting off topic, if you step away for 1 second, because it happens all the time. But no, I kind of liked both of those because they're ones that I can take back into my classroom.
I like the concept. I've used the concept. Is it concept map? Sorry, my brain is starting to get really tired. Right. Anyway, when I started teaching, everybody talked, oh, you need to have a graphic organizer, but I think I really liked in that article, it's a means to an end. You just don't have one just to have one. And I think when I started teaching, nobody ever told me that, it's like the graphic organizer was going to help solve everything. But I think you need to remember, once again, it's that balance, taking them, what is the reason and what am I using it for? I also like the discussion one, especially how the teacher allowed them to have 5, the example of 5 opportunities to share the error. And she was able to kind of warn one, hey, you've had 4. Is this what? I really like that. I'll try to see how I can incorporate that in my first graders. But Yeah.
I also read the discussion and questioning one. I teach Title I, and so most of my time is spent teaching them to read. So once we get to the comprehension, that is something that we talk through a lot because they're so focused on decoding the words that we don't get that just from the reading. So one way I do that is like a picture walk before we read the story. So we could talk about what's happening, who the characters are, where are they, and then they can take those ideas into their reading, and it will help them as they are decoding to get some of those words.
And I really like, Jen, like what you're saying about the picture walk and doing that. And then also, Lisa, you were talking about, the graphic organizer. It just reminds me how, like, some of those tools that I used when I read that part about the graphic organizer, and it kind of reminds me of picture walk, that what am I using this for too? And like how I really was intentional then about using whatever those tools are going to be for our discussion. I'm going to like bring those into my discussion. So whatever their graphic organizer is, like that's their like tool that's helped them process, and they have a better discussion with it because they've used that, or they have that visual of the picture walk. They have these visuals in front of them that helps them with that, whatever they're trying to discuss. And I find at least, and then also for that transfer later, it helps them just, again, those graphic organizers are for a purpose, and it usually relates back to that inquiry question, and they're processing through it.
That makes me think about, when trying to get kids to talk, and if they talk to each other first, they seem more likely to talk to us, especially at the high school level. To be honest, everyone just sits there, and doesn't want to say anything, but which is probably the opposite as in elementary. But I love that idea of using the graphic organizers as a discussion tool for pairs. Maybe use this to talk to your partner, to remember what's the story, what's going on, all that stuff, and then share as a large group. And it gets them talking, which I think is really a big part of the literacy key.
And that discussion really helps, I find, the lower level learners, like at least for high school, when we have a Socratic seminar, we bring to our like a discussion. I've had so many students be like, oh, now I get it. Like I totally was confused about the war in Afghanistan, but now it makes sense because they kind of had some ideas. They had some, but then just through that discussion and hearing their other peers talk or say things in a way that they maybe hadn't thought of, or that I wouldn't say, it helps them to understand concepts in different ways. Let's just talk really quickly about that. One other question is, how is timing important to strategies I use in the classroom to support my struggling readers and writers?
Does someone else want to go first?
I'll go. I think one way timing is important in my classroom with my small groups is a lot of my learners are in there because of maybe some attention issues they might have. So when I have them all engaged, it's really important to use those few minutes as effectively as possible. So timing is very important in my classroom.
I was curious, when you think about graphic organizers and discussion, like, do you find yourself using them more before the lesson, during the lesson, kind of at the culmination of a topic, or what's worked for you all?
I found that kind of interesting in the article as well, that they said that I think they found one study found that using graphic organizers had a better effect than before. And then I guess it goes back to, once again, your purpose. So like in first grade, I do a lot of graphic organizers just to build background knowledge, to start to try to get their links, so a lot of it's the webbing, but I can, if I did a Venn diagram, that would be better after we had talked about something, the compare and contrast. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be something that I'm going to be more aware of now, is the timing. When would this be the best? Before, middle, or after?
Yeah, I think it just kind of really depends on the the why of why you're using it. So I know we did one comparing and contrasting addition and subtraction for math, of being like, okay, well, when we add, does our number get bigger? Does it get smaller? So they can see both of those. And then with our habitat ones, that one has just been growing throughout. Every time we learn a new habitat, it's finally done. So that one, we kind of started it with, well, what is a habitat? What are the different habitats? What plants live there? What animals live there? What's the weather like? And so like, it just depends on your why of when you decide when you do it. Just like what Lisa said, if you did a Venn diagram, it's more beneficial if you do it at the end than if you do it at the beginning. But if you're doing it to do the background knowledge, then it's better to do it at the beginning to see what they know.
Lisa, in response to your question about sketchnoting, I have done a little research on it, and it seems to be very effective for a lot of students. In my situation, I don't have the opportunity to use it with students so much, but I have started using it for myself when I take classes or am reading a book about teaching or whatever, to use it for myself. Sketchnoting is just when you're taking the notes, you draw pictures that relate back to whatever you're learning. So it's kind of your own take on the notes. It's like your own graphic organizer almost.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was listening to you all talk about English learners, that need movement or something more full body, that's what made me think of sketchnoting, and curious if it is more effective or as effective with English learners as it is just with the general population. Because I know it's supposed to be effective, like you said, Jen, which is pretty cool. I'm wondering if it's, just like, is it more effective with English learners or not? That's something I want to figure that out.
I wonder if that would also be like, you guys from like vocabulary, like if it's a younger child, obviously sometimes drawing is not as, that skill is not there. And so if it was almost like pictures, that they would like, which of these pictures make sense to you, like to summarize what we learned today, and they kind of create their own sketch noting, but with pictures like that's already there that they can put inside their own notebook, so they don't have to actually draw it because they're younger. I wonder.
Yeah, like they can pull the pictures that it makes them think of and make a mental connection. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I'm just gonna, again, I encourage you to read through some of the other kind of materials. I'm gonna finish up just here today. I'm gonna skip our last couple other things too, just for time, so we end on time. And I have on slide 18, I'm just gonna go ahead and share the screen. Obviously you can take these, again, I understand you guys are working mostly with younger kids, but oh geez, Louise, sorry, I don't know how things works. These are for 18 here are different things that I do for my students. I find that for writing, so for example, we'll have an inquiry question and then we'll go through texts and go through the whole, that surface level. We'll have discussions and then we have a writing where they're answering that question. I find that a lot of my students, they still get stuck or intimidated by the structure of even a paragraph at like 10th grade because their level is quite low. So I offer them both sentence stems and like fill in the blank paragraphs, where it's in essence like the New Deal was more of a, and then it's kind of like we know success or failure, because the whole question was it more of a success or failure? So I kind of map out how it would look. And the first time we write, every student does that. And it's actually then really easy to go back through because I have them actually either revise it or rewrite it if their thinking is off or whatnot. But I find I have no students ever give me any like size or not doing it. When I told them to write a paragraph, it was like pulling teeth. It was, it was difficult. But when I provide that sentence frame or those paragraph frames, that fill in the blank is significantly easier. And then by the end of the quarter that I have them, many of my students don't use it anymore. They just would prefer to write because they understand what it looks like. And then another big scaffolding for writing that I use is just mentor texts. And I have them highlight the texts. We find different things in them. And so just what it looks like for them, whatever I'm writing, I always give them a mentor text that's kind of relatable to what a student would write. And so I have some examples of mentor texts that I've given to students in the slideshow. But again, I understand it's not quite appropriate for your guys' grade levels, but I always generally give them those two things, sentence frames and mentor text. And so my lowest level students generally will always be successful with those. And then those that don't need them, they don't use them. But for my students that do well, it gives them at least, this is the goal. This is where you need to be. And for the other ones, they use it a lot. So that's it for like the two main scaffolds that I do for writing, honestly, is just, again, a lot of mentor texts and a lot of sentence frames and paragraph frames. Those are my two big things for writing. And I'm going to skip down to resources because I really wanted to show you this one. This is the visible learning. This is the resource that will bring you to a lot of other kind of surface, deep, and transfer learning. And it's on this link here. And so again, this is a great link, this top one. The other one was for, it's a history one, but you guys aren't teaching history. I have one on Socratic seminars, but really for you guys, probably the best resource for you would be this visible learning one. That again I find it goes through just, again, tons of different ideas that you can use for surface, deep, and transfer level learning. And again, addressing that why we're doing certain things. So, yeah. Oh, and I like your saying, it sounds like it's a lot of pre-work, talking, reading to get them to the writing stage. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a lot of work. If it's writing, it's small. I only do small summary, it's check-ins, but I have a lot of reluctant writers. And so we have to just build knowledge, comprehension, vocabulary, all of that to get them to the writing stage. And then even then, we have to have sentence frames, paragraph frames. And then by the end of the quarter, though, I have almost nobody use those because they've had that to kind of build them and they know how to use that paragraph. They feel more comfortable. And also the sentence frames and the paragraph frames make it easier for me to give them feedback and for them to revise. Otherwise, it's all over the place. And it's hard for me to like, well, there's a lot of stuff going wrong here. It's way easier to address kind of where they're maybe line of reasoning is not quite correct. So that's pretty much it for today. We can end a few minutes early. It's been a really long day for you guys all day on the computer. So thank you so much for joining me in this last session. And I hope it was helpful for you and for your learners. And so, yeah, so I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And hopefully you can go take a nap.
Thank you, Krista, so much. I really appreciate how you gave us a lot of resources that we can go back and look at and think about how that applies to our own specific teaching situation and grade level. So that's awesome. Everybody else, thank you for being here today. Again, for being here in the afternoon. It's always a struggle in the afternoon. So you're going to have to like get some kind of a refreshing beverage this evening. Just so you know, you will receive, I know you've been getting lots of emails from Register My Conference. It's like Eventbrite. It sends you one like every 5 seconds, it seems like. So we apologize for all of those. But you're going to get another one, and it'll have a survey. And we encourage you to do the survey. We're really big here in the Idaho Coaching Network, for those of you who have been a part of it. We're really big on feedback to grow forward from where we're at. So if you can take the time to do that survey when it arrives, we will share that feedback with our facilitators today. And are there any questions before we let you go? Here it's cloudy and rainy. It's a good day to be inside.
I know, just one last point. Having you guys talk about it made me reflect on the big ahas that I had, and just reading it is I've really been thinking about this year. Why am I doing what I'm doing at what stage? And how is it helping them move them up to that deeper or transfer level learning? Because again, you just do certain things, and that has been kind of my constant. Why am I doing this? Do they have the skills, and how am I building them? So having you guys talk about it made me think of my process when I started when I read the book and my big ahas. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.